Welcome to the HR Uprising podcast. This podcast series explores HR hot topics and challenges through conversations with relevant experts and real-life HR, learning, and OD professionals. The HR Uprising is about learning through collaboration and evidence-based action. We want colleagues to have the confidence and skills to rise up through their organizations by delivering real, lasting business value. Now, introducing your host, chartered psychologist, experienced change agent, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach, Lucinda.
Hello and welcome to the HR Uprising podcast. Today I'm really delighted to say that it's one of our Conversations with series, and I have got a great guest, Adrian McDonagh, who is actually the founder of EasyWeb Group, an expert in recruitment. And I know this will be something that's really interesting, I think, to many of our HR colleagues out there, particularly people who are in a solo role who've got to deal with recruitment, or in a small team where actually getting the right resources and getting things happening can be challenging. But actually, if you're not in recruitment, that's fine too, because I know we're going to talk about talent and we're going to talk about candidate experience and lots of practical and innovative ways of managing people and bringing them into an organisation. So hello and welcome.
Welcome. Hi, Lucinda. Nice to be here.
Brilliant. Nice speaking to you. So I guess, would you like to introduce yourself maybe to the audience if they haven't come across EasyWeb? Tell us a bit about the business and your background.
Yeah, sure. So our story is I started the business as a recruitment business 1 year outside of university. So I spent the next 10 years probably making every mistake possible. It was almost proving the concept of any idiot could run a recruitment business, and I was trying to disprove that theory. But eventually we worked out how to run a business, and it's worked quite well. And then in 2005 we launched EasyWeb, initially as a recruitment advertising business, and then we worked out that one of the key things we could offer was applicant tracking software. So we've built that into our service. So really our customers use our software and they use our advertising and recruitment agency services. And I suppose one of the best and interesting things I've done in the last few years was about 10 years ago, we started doing workshops. So we started doing face-to-face workshops for free, and I've trained over 1,000 HR professionals every year for the last 10 years. And that's been just enlightening. I've enjoyed doing it, but it's also taught me so much about what's going on in the market.
I mean, that's one of the things that's how we came to meet each other, really, that I'd heard from somebody who'd been involved in a webinar and also about the training that you do. And that's why I felt you'd be really interesting to people who listen to the HR Uprising, because you have literally heard the pains of thousands of HR professionals. What sort of things have you come across?
Well, I think ultimately most of it comes down to time. I mean, certainly since 2008, recruitment HR teams, whether you've got an in-house recruitment team or a HR team, their resources are smaller and they've got to do more with less. And I think they largely are through technology and lots of efficiencies, but the challenges are still there. And what I see now, particularly with HR professionals, is it's quite a complicated solution recruitment, because you've got the advertising piece of it, you've got the marketing piece, you've got Glassdoor, you've got your employer reputation, and then there's an onboarding. And we're hearing more stories now, for example, where candidates have expectations about onboarding. They're disappointed if they're not wowed, but if they're not welcomed into the business with a bit of fanfare, then they're off to a bad start. I mean,
that's, as you know, my background's learning and development, so I am completely ignorant really about recruitment. In terms of this, there's various bits of jargon, which I'd love you to enlighten me on, one of which would be candidate experience, which we hear about. Yep. And actually, we talked about this a bit earlier, so onboarding and how these things all link together. So I guess actually, let's start with that. Could you enlighten me a bit on what you're meaning by things like candidate experience? Because this is why they're saying that people, if they don't have the right candidate experience, you're losing them before they even enter the company even?
Yeah, so one of the things I talk about is on the workshops is how people look after customers. So, if you're trying to win a customer, you might be inviting them to Ascot and rolling out the red carpet, or, there's a lot of effort that goes into customers for most organisations, most businesses. And then you look at the effort that goes into candidates. The reality is, for most candidates applying to most jobs these days, they don't hear back. Yeah. So, and the application process could be 15, 20 minutes, and they don't hear back at all. So many candidates take the view, there's almost two types of candidates in a really simplistic format. Some candidates might just be marketing their CV out, and when something comes back, then maybe they'll have a look at it and give it a bit more due diligence, or they're so active they're looking for a job and they'll take a job.
Yeah.
People come to my workshop that's not their focus. They do need those type of candidates for certain roles, but their focus is really those sort of discerning candidates, the harder to find candidates, the more passive candidates. And they are really kicking the tires of the car, checking out the organisation quite heavily, more and more now, whether that's Glassdoor, contacts on social networks. Before they make that important move, they want to make sure they've done a decent bit of work to make sure it's not just a leap into the unknown. So then your poor HR manager, recruitment manager has got, to present a whole picture, a whole story. And the organisations that do that fantastically well, I think startups do it really well, typically because you've got like the founder, it delivers his or her story. And it's like, this is why we're here, this is the mission we're on, this is what we're trying to change. And that all comes across, and this is our culture, and this is have pictures of our office, and this is us on social media. So they do it fantastically well. The big companies have big recruitment marketing teams. I don't think they do it anywhere near as well, but they have the capacity and they do it. And then they tell a story. And then what our real focus is that what we call the everyday customers, the less well-known customers that have got some fantastic stories out there, and people join those businesses without, but hopefully we can help them to tell their story. And that's what one of the big drivers of my workshop is really showing people how easy it is to do. And the smaller companies have big advantages about telling their story. We're 65 staff big. Telling our story is much easier than a huge organisation like IBM.
Well, also because you're the founder, so you've got your natural passion that you can get through to it. But then, so if I'm an HR person, then I'm not necessarily the founder. So it's how can I be as engaging and passionate, or even remember to. I mean, when you're saying that actually a very high proportion of people don't even hear back, and I suppose in this context of war for talent, or the fact that actually you're saying almost the more talented people, the people we want to recruit the most, are the least likely to be recruited, I guess, if they don't have a good experience. That's the risk to us as recruiters.
Yeah.
So what I'm a very busy person. I'm imagining one of the reasons I don't hear back is it's difficult for me as an HR person if I've got to respond personally. I'm assuming systems can do that, can they?
Systems can do all that quite easily. Even for people, here's another example of a little candidate experience. So if you don't have a recruitment system, you probably have a generic email address like HR or careers@insert name of company.com. And when you ping that email to that organisation, it lands and you get an automated email back saying, fairly, heavy legal, thanks for emailing the recruitment department. Here's our privacy policy, which is important to add in the GDPR world we live in. But they've really missed an opportunity. They take thousands of emails into that inbox every year, and that automated email back, assuming they've got one set up, should have the privacy policy and the other key things. It should tell the candidate, look, if you're emailing us about a job, this is what's going to happen next, in really nice, easy to understand language. And then there's an opportunity to and by the way, if you don't know much about us, here's a link to our CEO talking about this, or here's a link to our history of the business, or whatever else it is. So it's just taking
it's common
each and
sense
every
then,
opportunity.
really, isn't it? It's just taking that little bit of time to think of actually a touch point to the organisation for the candidate. How can we make sure that touch point is maximised? So you've only got to write that content once, haven't you? And
exactly.
Then it goes out every time.
We'll refresh it once a year, but you're right. It can be. And
when the MD leaves.
you get out the post-it notes. A bit like your marketing team probably do this with a customer journey, and they sort of say, right, so here are the touch points of the journey, and you do the same as a candidate and think about what is the candidate journey? How can it be improved? And the thing as well is, this is where if it's a customer journey you're doing, you've got a highly competitive market to wow a customer, to get them to stop and go, wow, I didn't expect that. That was really nice touch. And often it isn't the expensive touch, it's the personal touch. Mm-hmm. With candidates, much easier to wow a candidate, send them a little card after an interview or whatever it is. It's much easier to sort of go, yeah, fantastic. I was explaining to you when you come into our office today that we have a little bio form. So when people, it sounds really, really dull when I describe it like that. So when people join EasyWeb, one of our team members looked after it and developed the execution rate, and it's really well. So we send out a little information pack saying, here are the other team members, and you can read their bios so you can see who else you're going to be working with. And it's what they do, how long they've been here, that sort of stuff. But it's also some of the funnier stuff, like, what are their passions and interests outside of work, or do they have pets or whatever else. So hopefully when you join the team, you sort of feel a little bit familiar with them a little bit. You might already know a couple of people that you might share a few, hopefully you get more.
Or not talk football with.
Exactly. Certain people that, if it says cycling, for example, and you're not into cycling, very few people have a mild interest in cycling, in my experience.
That's true.
So,
yes.
so
I'm married to one.
Okay. So, But yeah, so what we asked the new employee to fill out is a tiny little form telling them about themselves. So, and it's not a lie. We are doing it for them to have a bio for them for the future. But when they tell us, I'm, passionate about this, and my favourite snack is X, my favourite biscuit is Jammy Dodgers, and if I've got one sporting team, it's this or something. And then from that wealth of information, we have a small budget. I don't actually know the budget. I think it's about £25, maybe slightly larger. And our team member who looks after it buys highly personalised products and gifts. So that when they join day one, it's not just a standard EasyWeb notepad, EasyWeb bottle. There's a couple of nice little personal touches there.
I hope you're not giving it away to your new staff, but that's because you've got someone arriving, haven't you? I saw the balloons today.
Yeah, there's 2 people who have arrived. Yeah, we put balloons up on the desk and stuff as well, which is great because people encourage them to go to their desk and talk to the new people and reminds people there's new people here. Hopefully, if you're not incredibly shy, but your first few days might be a bit tough.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a nice touch, and I think that's the challenge. Is like the technology is great, and I love technology, but it's where does technology step in and where does the personal touch step in?
But it is interesting because I just don't think it even crosses lots of people's minds. I actually think you're doing quite a good job in terms of giving people a plan to start. And I think back to, managers that I used to work with, and being a manager, it was almost like HR did the recruitment and then the person would rock up, and if you were lucky, they'd have an induction plan. And it is really key, because I also remember studies showing that your first 6 weeks in a company, your experience in that first 6 weeks determines exactly how long you stay. So if you have a crap experience, you are much more likely to leave. So I think it's inspired, but you don't think about being personal about it, that personal touch and getting that info.
I guess the only challenge is if the company has that level of personal touch and personalisation and you can see all the new people arriving and they're getting that great welcome that you had, is that journey continues.
Do you do things at birthdays and stuff as well then?
One of the nice things I think, I'll put it on here because then it will commit me to do it. One of the nice things I think we want to do it, but birthdays we don't do so much. I think 1 year anniversaries we're thinking of doing, and one of the nice things we thought about doing was giving out book tokens to our staff's kids on their birthday, and we thought that would be a nice. We want to do something that's just slightly different.
Yeah.
So we thought that would be a nice touch, and it obviously sort of goes with our ethos and values of ideally with these book tokens they will buy books rather than computer games.
Yeah. We celebrate anniversaries rather than birthdays. That was a kind of a strategic decision that we made. But it becomes a job on itself again, isn't it, in terms of remembering when these are, especially
the HR systems help you on that front at least. That's maybe not the prime reason you buy a HR system, but it's certainly useful.
Yeah. Anniversary time. Great. And any other? So that was make it personal is what we were saying there in terms of bringing people on is a good tip in terms of that. Any other tips which you'd say in terms of the highest impact practice for an HR professional recruiting people in?
I think one of the great things, I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. I'm guessing you might be a Simon Sinek fan. Yeah, a little bit. No, okay.
Never heard of him. Better go and look him up quickly.
He has, I think it's the 3rd most watched TED Talk. So
okay.
But people are still discovering him, and I've watched the TED Talk, and I watched them recently, and that it clicked for me. It's all about finding your why. So we've done that as a business now. We're communicating that as a business. So our staff are really on that journey with us, and they're really on mission, and they know what we believe and what our purpose is and how we're going to get there. So I think that whole thing, it comes through across all of our staff hopefully as well now. So the person who's looking after the onboarding will be positioning it perfectly, and it will just be flowing through. It'll come through in our adverts. So I think that's very, very powerful. So
it's having a purpose and a vision, a why to the business that you can then transfer on again. So
and our why, which you're no doubt about to ask me, our why, I don't know off verbatim yet, which I should do because I'm reading off a PowerPoint that I'm presenting. But our why is in the general scheme of things. It doesn't sound that exciting, but we had to get something that was, we had to really address that. We worked with a consultant who we said, our why is, our original sort of concept, why 1.0 for us would have been something like, we believe every organisation should have the potential to deliver great candidate experiences. And the consultant we worked with that knew our business very well just said, that's not your why. And just, come on, Adrian, really, why did you set the business up like this? Why did you do this? What was the purpose of it? Why do you do this and you don't do that? And ultimately what we've come up with is we want to help everyday organisations, which is those mid-range organisations I mentioned. We want to help everyday organisations to compete against the very biggest and best recruiters in the marketplace, and not get ripped off. And that's our bit. It's not very sexy, but it is what we do and what we believe in. And by telling it to our staff go, well, yeah, that is what we do. Whereas if we said, we're all about candidate experience, they might say, well, we're about candidate experience, but are we all about candidate experience? So whatever you reside with, if you go on that journey, it's got to be honest. It's
got to be congruent, hasn't it? Because it's almost about, you could make up a why, which sounds like the sexy buzzword of the HR being full of buzzwords, or you can come up with something that's sincere, which actually people might buy into.
And obviously your why come to you while you were hiking up Kilimanjaro or something, like the founder story that nobody believes anyway. So that wasn't where our why come from. It come from going to London, sitting in a room and someone just saying, no, that isn't your why, and just stripping an onion back further and further until we got, and we said, actually, it's nowhere near as sexy for to me, but that is it. So
it's all about making a difference, isn't it? Again, I mean, there's the why for the HR uprising that I was thinking about. Why are we doing this? And my story in terms of I've been in software, but actually I've always been an HR L&D person, and it was about getting real. And actually, I'm frustrated with hearing that as a profession, HR, when I say HR learning and development, OD, I mean everybody there, we are kind of always being told that we're not good enough, we're not credible enough, we're not evidence-based, we're not strategic enough. And I go round, I've been around to all of the customers, and I see that different sectors, people have got exactly the same problems, and you just feel that we ought to be able to collaborate. So for me, the why was actually, can we listen to real people in real businesses, and fix some of each other's problems, just learn from each other and get better. Because I'm going to go home with 3 or 4 things that are going to make my business better just from chatting to you today.
I've got a couple as well, so it's been a good
I need to raise my game a bit. But I think there's lots there, and we're often so busy we don't actually get a chance to understand, to share that information. So that occurred to me, was this, why did we do this? And that's why this has come about, this podcast series as well. So I guess the interesting thing is, will people do things differently when they've heard them from each other? And you've met lots of HR professionals. Do they put things into action that they learn from each other when you have them on the training course? In my experience, I mean, that's one of the things we're trying to do with our workshop, is really sort of drill down, and now we're trying to do more one-to-one stuff. Even we do that for free as well after the workshops, with people that are ready, that like the idea, want to go ahead with that concept, and want to just help them move it along and get it into action, or maybe bring me back into their organisation then to talk to stakeholders to say, Adrian, can you just explain about candidate experience and what we need to do and why it's important to the CEO or whatever? Because that's one of my challenges is, I really want HR people to be brave enough to do this. So for example, we do a lovely exercise in the workshop where we ask people, like, raise your hand if you did something different in the last 12 months that failed. Sometimes I don't add in that failed, but sometimes I do. But very rare does anyone raise their hand to say, yeah, I tried something different. And I don't know. Is that, you might know HR folk better than me, is that because they're more rule followers than rule breakers? And I joke and say, look, if this was a marketing workshop, everyone's hand would have been up saying, well, we tried to do this, but it didn't work. And we also tried to sponsor the local kids football team, or we tried to do this, or we tried these things, we tried video, we tried this, I can't speak for everyone out there, but I do think there are different cultures in different bits of HR. And I always used to say in learning and development, it was the fun bit of HR, so you had much more freedom to try. So I think if you had lots of L&D people in there, that's kind of you've got more freedom to be creative. If you're operational HR, I do think you have an awful lot of time basically implementing process, and you have almost completely different motivation, or have to, be involved in doing that. And actually change type people are quite different from that. So maybe it's different personality types. I always imagined that recruitment was a bit more salesy. So whether you'd have slightly different personality type if you're recruiting across the piece. But where I think the point that you're making there, though, is you are ending up having to come in and talk to CEOs or CEOs. The question that I don't know the answer to, and what I really would dearly like as a profession to help each other get better at, is why are we not able to challenge the CEO? Why do they not listen to us when we're in the organisation? You've got to get someone external to come in and talk to them. And you're a bloke. I hope it isn't a male-female thing. But there is that piece of that, isn't there?
Yeah, and it's the bit that I know there's a question there, but I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
And I'm mindful of that. I'm trying to go on my journey, maybe not with a podcast, but I'll go on my journey to try and speak to people and find out the answers and try and get into those businesses and understand why it happens. And if we give them a few more tools and give them a bit more support, could we get them across the line? Because we really love to see them do that journey, and they'll get more from that from us, and that, because we don't charge for this, so then that will just put us in a better place with them. So we want them to have good actions, and
their own credibility will increase as well, because the value that they're bringing to the organisation is higher.
And I've never worked in a big organisation. The biggest organisation is 65 staff, which is my own company now. So I worked a year outside of university for a company slightly smaller than 65. So I don't fully get. I'm told about the politics and about getting decisions can take this long and this long, but I don't fully get it. And I think the other side of that coin is a lot of what we're talking about with candidate experience. We're talking about wowing candidates. So compare that to onboarding, where if the onboarding is not good enough, people will be upset and might even complain and say, raise a query back to HR or something. If the candidate experience won't be good in many organizations, so the candidates are used to that. So then the challenge becomes, this is a potential competitive advantage your organization could have in a landscape you said is highly competitive. Why don't you take it? It's, and we can, in the workshop, we can remove all the obstacles, time, costs, we can largely remove or minimize most of those obstacles, but people still can't move forward in some cases, or in many cases. And that's a frustration. So come along to my workshops and you'll have a lovely morning or afternoon. There's tea and coffee and biscuits, and you'll learn lots of great ideas and you won't implement them.
Well, that's a different criticism about training, though, isn't it?
Hopefully you will. Obviously, I'm being a bit facetious.
Yeah, hopefully they're very practical, but what do we take back from the training workplace? Completely different story. And incidentally, if you do want to go along to one of Adrian's workshops, all the details will be on the footer of the show notes. So we'll put links there for you to get there.
Or it's easywebtraining.com. It's nice and easy.
Brilliant. So, so we've talked about CEOs and how we persuade those and how we can implement stuff that we know and how you can maybe help people. I don't know whether it's about courage or knowing what to do. And there's questions there we don't know the answer to. So moving on in terms of our conversation, where do you see recruitment going? Would you say that it's changed a lot in the time you've been involved, 20 odd years? What have the changes been and what do you see coming in the next 20 odd years?
Yeah, it's changed in 20 years, for example. Just a quick history, it would be, it was simple. It was simple and expensive. You advertised on local press or trade press, it was very expensive. You could label your job as almost anything because people are turning the page, they will see it. It's that easy. So you want to label a job as sandwich artist, people will see it. Then obviously it went online to job boards, you label your job sandwich artist, it's all keyword driven, no one's going to see it. So it's a very different entity. It's much cheaper, a bit more complicated. And now maybe we're a lot more efficient, the recruiters are better, the candidates are better at using the job boards and other tools. But now we've got this latest trend of, being able to see that much further into businesses with sites like Glassdoor, and you can get reviews on Indeed, and obviously social networks now give us much more reach out into, you'll all know someone who worked there and you better reach out and get stories or find out what goes on behind the scenes. So it's a much more complex landscape. And
expectations are higher, basically, as well, people.
I'd say, yeah. I think one of the nice things that I do like this as well is, people will give organisations a chance. So, people will work, many people listen to this, and many of my friends and family work for organisations they've never heard of before. And there isn't a snobbiness about, if you work for a company called ABC Widgets, people say, well, what do they do then? It's like, and that's the mindset of many candidates. It's like they won't rule you out just because you're not a household name. The question is, and we all get frustrated looking at websites, if we can't find the information we want quickly and it isn't engaging, we leave.
Do you have a view on, you bring someone in and you think they're fantastic and they come in open-minded as ABC Widgets, yet sometimes they can end up being disengaged or negative within a culture. Do you have a view on why that happens or how that happens or how to prevent it?
Yeah, I suppose it can happen for a bunch of reasons. I think we're very transparent. I think you were making a reference to me earlier that I did a little test on unconscious bias, and it showed that I had a moderate bias towards white people. And I published that as an update on LinkedIn, and it was brave, or I don't know what the word you said was, but that's just how we are as a business. It's just, we are just transparent. We're quite comfortable in our own skin, not literally, obviously, but we're happy telling our story, putting stuff out there, being honest. And I think so. We've got a very open culture. And one of the problems is I've only worked in this one business really, so we've got a very open culture, and we like to think that people can come to us, will come to us.
And do they always? Have you ever had people that haven't?
At the moment, we're on a crazy journey the last couple of years. We haven't lost many people in the last couple of years. We've lost a few people that have been good, and they go on in many cases to be customers, and it's a good time to leave. There's the normal, in some areas the career development may not be able to keep up with the opportunity may not be there when the person's ready, and that happens in small companies, I guess. But largely we're able to keep up with that aspiration. But yeah, we do pretty well. Compared to what we were doing, I mean, our numbers back in the day were not good. Recruitment is hilarious when you think of how bad they are at recruitment and retention. So every recruitment business is pretty terrible at it. So yeah, we found our way, and it's not that strategic. We're a better company. People want to work for a better company. We tell our story. We know our story. People believe in what we're doing, and we're honest. It's like we are what we say we are. There's no point, as I said at the start, there's no point putting up this big fanfare and telling your story and putting it all out there, and then people join, and it's somewhat different.
So you set the expectations up, and you've got your balloons and your huge why, and then the actual experience is it's not true. Then that's almost more disappointing, probably.
And I think the challenges, and certainly in bigger companies as well, is like that may be honestly your experience. Like you may sit in HR and the team is great, and you love your colleagues, and you're there for 10 years, and you know the MD, and you remember when it was a 50 staff company, and now it's gone to 1,500. But it may not be everyone else's experience. It may not be the outbound call center team's experience. And those are challenges, because you've got to represent fairly.
Well, yeah, because actually the experience becomes about the direct line manager, doesn't it? So you're now 6 people, you've got line managers. They can't get that experience automatically from you.
And being honest, putting my CEO, well, no, Sean's the CEO, but I'm the founder. But putting my founder hat on, a bad employee, you've got to just get them out of business. Yeah, it's not good for you. It's not good for you. It's not good for them. I think we were talking before, open and honestly, about. We've got 250 clients. We have a certain client at the moment. I won't say that I'm not that transparent on talking about client, but we have one client, and I had a conversation over there and said, I don't think this is working for you. This isn't working for us. Having you complain about the software not being the right type of software for you, and they probably should have done a better job of their own due diligence in our job. And I'm sure there's things we could have done better as well. But we'd rather be open and honest with a customer and say, look, you've got a 2-year contract. Why don't we just tear it up? We don't need that customer. They don't need us. There are other providers out there. There are other customers out there for us. If it's not working, then let's agree an amicable way to depart. And it's the same with an employee, so particularly this size.
Yeah. So again, that's about being open, though, isn't it? Yeah. But being courageous enough to say it as it is. And linking back then to HR who might be recruiting people, maybe there's something here about actually giving feedback to the candidate who wasn't the right candidate at the time, and managing that feedback process. And again, I don't think, lots of people say you don't get feedback very often from those sorts of things. I mean, are there ways in which you can advise people how they could do that more easily or more effectively or efficiently? Yeah, so we're putting
because we're very, very focused on candidate experience, the software is going to be very much positioned around a candidate experience product. It's all about a product your candidates will love and will help you to get candidates to love your organisation. So we can't take that standpoint and be a bit dodgy and be a bit inconsistent in our experience. So one of the things we're putting on our website shortly is a candidate charter. We're literally just agreeing it with each of the managers. We can't impose it on them. We've got to say, look, remember our mission, guys. This is what we're doing. Are you all on board with this? Could you keep to these SLAs? Because we're publishing them out there, and we're putting it front and centre for the candidates and telling them, if you apply, you'll get feedback within 2 working days. It may not be a decision or an interview, but you'll get at least, we like your profile, you've been somewhat shortlisted, you're on the shortlist as a potential interviewee, give us a bit longer, we will come back to you in due course, and then we won't take too much longer than that. It'll have things like interview feedback, just clear and honest interview feedback. If there's a reason you're not moving someone forward, we just believe in being honest, not brutally honest. It might have to frame it in a nice way, but hopefully that will still communicate the important message that candidate needs for the next interview.
Yeah, give a specific reason. And I'm thinking again then for if I was an HR professional responsible for recruitment, quite often you then have a dependency on line managers, because so they might be involved with that recruitment process. So that I like that idea of the management charter is actually going, you are working in partnership with your HR with the line manager to get them that candidate, setting expectations, contracting with your managers and saying, this is what you need to do. If you want to make sure that I can bring you quality candidates, you've got to make sure they have a quality experience. And part of that is turning it around and whatever it is you agree, your 2-day turnaround time, etc., quality feedback.
And surveying the candidates as well. Surveying the candidates at interview, after interview, every single candidate. And obviously encouraging them to post on Glassdoor and just being open and transparent. Now that's what you probably do that once you're more comfortable that you've ironed out any sort of foibles in your process. And then when you're we've got a great process here now, let's encourage these candidates to go and post on Glassdoor. And I think the key thing there is timing. Encourage them to do that nice and quickly, because then the actual decision at interview is a natural thing. Like, the decision at interview might, pollute that verdict. So they might be about to write a fairly reasonable thank you, it was a nice interview type review on Glassdoor. And then if they feedback that you've not been selected for X and Y reason, they might be like, particularly if you're giving clear and honest feedback, because clear and honest feedback is, you've got to be brave to do it. You may be causing yourself an extra couple of headaches there, but we just believe in it and think, this is, we're going to tell you this. If you don't want to take it on board, that's fine. But we want to tell you how you've come across to us and what our perception was. And it might be wrong, but we're nice guys, and this is why we're doing it.
Makes sense. All right. So in terms of, we're going half an hour, so I've got a couple more questions, if that's all right.
Okay,
one of them loops back to something we referred to earlier, as you said, and it is linked to you being open and honest. Yes, I saw that you posted on LinkedIn that you'd gone through a bias questionnaire or something, and you said you're slightly biased there. And I noticed you're talking at the CIPD on this topic, I think, bias and diversity. What would be relevant to share to this audience? Some tips there about how we can reduce unconscious bias or increase diversity, whichever angle you want to take it from.
So my particular focus of that day will be on the use of technology in that. So we'll be talking about elements like video interview, talking about blind CVs, and so a lot of this technology is, obviously video interviews are here. Our video interview provider that we use, I'll give them a plug, they're called Shine Video Interviews. Most providers, I think, have the same capacity to do blind video interviews. So you can take the video interview and you can, not show the person's face and not show the person's name, and actually, and just listen back to their answers.
I was going to say, can I ask a really basic question? What's the point of video if you're not going to see them?
Well, you can then watch the video later on if you wish, and it helps you confirm. But also, it's a more natural thing for the candidate. The candidate doesn't know they're not going to show their visuals. You're going to get the audio, a bit like a podcast. If you said to the candidate, we're going to do a podcast interview, it's like, that's a bit confusing for them maybe. So they still have a natural experience and see how they're coming across, but you just don't show that part if you want to. And what I guess one of the things I'm suggesting is if you do video interviews, then maybe trial doing that and see if the results are different, because that's the biggest test of whether there is a bias. See if there's a bias there at all. And one of the things I really like with video interviews, it's not quite about diversity, is the idea that if you know you're not going to bring certain people in for interview typically, and it's a role where there's about communication skills and the softer skills that are not on CVs, then maybe shovel a few video interviews out there to a few people to say, look, why don't you give us a quick showcase of yourselves? And then it's not, hopefully you find a bit more of the hidden talent. So I like the idea that video interviews are not just about making the process slicker and maybe getting a chance to see more people, but maybe getting a chance to see people you wouldn't have otherwise considered. If you've got a graduate management scheme and you only get 20 people to assessment day, well, let's video interview 100. And I bet you change your view on who's coming to the assessment day.
So actually almost widening your pool, basically.
Yeah, that's the beauty of video interviews. But so the diversity thing is, it's interesting. There's a lot of stuff going on there, but the technology's out there at the moment to take the CVs, parse the CV, break each CV down into it, recognize each individual component. This is not even AI, it's much simpler than that. And then to rebuild that CV in a new format, which could be a blind format. Hence, you could remove the names of educational establishments, you could remove details like religions and hobbies and interests, and obviously names and date of births, and it just becomes about skills and experience. So that's something we're not far off, but it's out there and lots of people are able to do it as well. And what we want to do is we want to be able to bring that into the market, into the mid-market, where lots of companies of 100 staff or so would never have the capacity to do it. We want to at least, and then they may not even think about those things, and then like show them it and educate them and say, look, why don't you trial doing this? You might find you have a much better interview process and you might solve your own diversity issues.
One large company that I worked with, that I don't actually know how their impact of this, but they decided with their diversity that they were actually going to bring in, sort of positively discriminate or force that the people they would bring to interview would be diverse.
Yeah.
And then I guess they could find out whether it was then the interview that was, whether it was the applications that was making the difference, or whether it was actually the process they were going through. I actually don't know the answer.
So it's a bit like what they call the Rooney rule,
Right.
which comes from the NFL and American football, where every head coach, I think it's every coaching position, had to have at least one minority candidate, and they viewed that was, a good way of bringing more minority candidates through.
So it's about bringing the candidates in, isn't it? So it's not the same as quotas, is it? Because it's not forcing them into there, but it's making sure you're having those people to choose from.
And I think they might have the same thing, or they've certainly discussed it in the Football Association as well, now in the Premiership as well, where they're going to have at least one candidate interviewed from minority. But I think they're missing a trick. If you look at the, I'm a bit of a football fan, but if you look at the prevalence of black football managers, let's say, or even Asian football managers, people that the propensity of percentage of them in the game is crazy. If you want to, in a world of competitive advantage, it just seems obvious. Go out and find the black manager, because most of them are being overlooked. So it's probably that simple. You see all the stats about Moneyball and how to sort of try and predict a better player. It's like, well, there's a clear advantage there for people in a competitive sports world. But it's not about competitive advantage; it's about fairness and opportunity. I'm lucky. My mum came over from Ireland in the 1960s and tells me there were signs up in London saying "No dirty Irish." But largely, every immigrant population has suffered that. But as an immigrant population, the Irish or the Polish, whoever, we're okay because we assimilate very fast because we look like everyone else now. But it's not as easy for everyone else. So, yeah.
This is a bit of a random one. It just occurred to me when you were asking. Have you got any tips on great questions if you were interviewing?
See, I don't think I'm that good at interviewing. I did an interview the other day on a Friday afternoon, and it was one candidate, and this is not answering your question at all. And we just had a lovely chat, and we were talking about the role, and we were just talking about our kids, and we were talking about this and that and the other, and we finished off playing a game of pool. So I then said the second interview to my colleague, who's the line manager. I said, ask them some questions. Yeah, she's a lovely lady. She's fantastic personality. I can guarantee her personality is great. She's got the experience you want. We covered that quite quickly. Maybe go over it in more detail and see how you get on. I think I was probably just too relaxed on a Friday, and I don't normally do interviews on my own. Normally there's two people there. And my colleague came back and had exactly the same experience and said, "Oh, we just got off subject, and she was just so lovely, and we just chatted, and she's just such a great fit for us." It was like, but hopefully we still covered enough of the process. So yeah, in answer to your question, I don't think
you haven't got any wonderful questions.
No, I think I'm good at the sort of my expertise is all about bringing the person in, like getting the talent, attracting them, marketing to them, and then when you said like, do you do really good interviews here? I think we do a good interview day. But I think maybe the HR community would be better at sticking to competency-based interviews and the scoring and the process and the fairness of how they do it and the rigidity of how they do it. As a small company, we're probably, I'm going to keep using that as an bit, because we're probably not as structured as we'll probably go on a little journey soon now and get a bit more structured and a bit more systematic in the way we score and rate candidates to make sure we're being absolutely fair. At the moment, we sort of say, yeah, I really like that person, I think they'll be really good, or I'm not so sure about X or Y, but it's not probably the environment you're more used to, I guess.
Well, it's interesting. I'm just thinking, certainly the evidence or the academic research, but I'm going back 20 years, I haven't looked at it recently, was that structured interviews are better in getting consistent candidates coming through, whether it's video or otherwise, that's structured. So you should have some structure. Interesting though, in an environment this size, maybe it is about cultural fit, maybe you need both. Although someone would probably say you've got halo effect going on, hopefully this person is going to be wonderful. In terms of that.
She has started. She's on day 2.
Okay.
I caught up with them yesterday.
No pressure.
So yeah, so far brilliant. An amazing employee.
That
turned up on day 2, brilliant.
That can be part of the battle. I mean, the interesting thing though, I think there is it's about differences that you've identified that actually maybe in a recruitment team, if you are lucky enough that you've got a range of people involved in the recruitment process, that you're part of the candidate experience, you're part of the wow and making sure you can tell a story. Someone else might be, to sit alongside you might be the person who makes sure you follow a structure, and that might be our best way of doing things, playing to people's strengths in terms of the recruitment process. Yeah,
and we know our psychometric profiles here quite well. So I'm sort of high I, high D, if you know your Thomas, or we do colours, so I'm red, yellow. So my colleagues who are more blue, maybe, and possibly even green, they're better listeners and they're more diligent and they're more thorough. So So
sit with somebody of the opposite colour.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense because we're both red yellow. I think we've probably gone off at a tangent. And I guess on that note, I think it's been really fascinating talking to you, Adrian, and as we had a really great chat before and probably afterwards.
Yes, I think we could talk all day. And my first podcast as well, so it's been great. It's been easy.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. And so we'll look forward to getting it out there. And obviously for those on here, this is Adrian McDonagh of EasyWeb Group. Thank you very much for being part of the HR Uprising. And any other information I'll stick on the show notes and links to the site as well. So maybe take advantage of your training and look at what you guys do.
Excellent, thank you. Lucinda, good luck. Viva la revolution with the Uprising.
That's it, absolutely right. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast. You can access more information, including resources or links mentioned in the show, at our website, www.hruprising.com. Also, you might want to join our LinkedIn community or tweet to us at HR Uprising. We'd love to hear from you.